Our next question comes from Cheryl B. Cheryl, are you ready? Hello?
Hello, Chris.
The floor is yours.
Hello, Tom, and everybody in MBT land. How's everybody doing? I'm here
Good.
with
Hi, nice to see you all.
Here's my question. Well, it's kind of our question. I'm curious. Accepting death as part of life has changed some things. It doesn't feel as sad as when we thought death meant oblivion forever. It seems to me that getting upset and staying upset for a few years isn't helpful, as extreme sadness and negative feelings just spreads out to everyone around us. To me, it seems that staying positive and happy is more helpful for my growth and everyone else's around me. Is grief what we do? Is grief just what we do when people die, or is grief the sadness of the loss, or maybe the fear of our own death? Maybe the feeling of disconnection from that person causes grief. Thinking about this isn't really easy. In a lot of cultures, it doesn't, if you don't get sad following someone's death, you're considered heartless. I'm not saying it's better to be, it's better to be like at a funeral and all smiles and happy when everyone else is sad. But I'm leaning toward not being sad and full of grief once I leave the funeral and go on with my life. Seems the better way to me, but could this be a bit sociopathic on other levels? What are your thoughts around this, Tom?
Okay, well, that's a good question. What about grief? Grief, for the most part, Cheryl, is very closely aligned to self-pity. Grief is mostly about people are unhappy and miserable because their life is changing. It's not so much about the dead person as it is about them. Now, they don't have what they want. They want that person to be there. They want to share their time with that person. That person's not there. Now they're going to have to do without them, and they don't like that. So it's more of a, oh no, life isn't going to be as fun or as happy or as nice as it was. It's not going to be the way I want it to be. Well, that's a problem when we say, I'm upset because life isn't the way I want it to be. That already tells you there's a problem, right? That's basically self-focus, self-centeredness. You're not getting what you want, and that upsets you, makes you unhappy. All right, so that's what most grief is. Now, some of that, because when somebody dies, if that person is very close to you, particularly if they're a significant other or somebody whose your life is very much entwined with, then there's a huge amount of change. Suddenly, they took care of all the financial things and paid all the bills, and you don't even know where the checkbook is, but suddenly you have to do that function, and you don't know how. And that and 100 other things are just like that. So it can be this huge change, and that change can be scary. And if you're frightened by all the change that's going to come and all those things that are going to be more difficult, again, that's self-centered. It's about you, about my problem, because what I'm going to have to do, about what services I'm not going to get anymore, and so on. But it's normal to feel that way. Whenever you run into a vast amount of change, to be taken aback for a while, to have to adjust to it, to have to come to terms with it, takes a little time. Most people don't take those kind of sharp turns, very, very quickly. But it shouldn't take a lot of time. You need to deal with the change, and you may feel overloaded, overwhelmed, exasperated. All those sorts of things are kind of normal feelings when suddenly a big dump of change hits you. But you kind of, eventually you get yourself together and go do what you have to do, and life goes on. So it's normal and expected for people to, have some grief time to deal with the changes they're going to have to deal with. But the grieving itself is a little indulgence in self-pity, and generally is not about the other person, because the other person is now dead and they're starting a whole new adventure. They're now going to go off and learn more things. Most people, particularly if the person died because they were old, died of old age, or they were, people tend to paint themselves into corners as they get old, and what they need is to start over. So it's a joyous thing. And some cultures throw parties when somebody dies. Some cultures, I remember back in the 1800s, the Irish would have a wake, and the wakes that they would have at somebody's passing would basically start out as funerals and turn into, uproarious parties. Mm-hmm. And that's because, okay, we're sad, we're going to miss Joe, but, and then they tell jokes about Joe and what he did and things he didn't do, and, all the things, and they just kind of remember him. And that's sort of nice. Joe gets up in everybody's memory because he just died. So everybody remembers all the things they interacted with him, and they're probably glad that they spent some time with him. So that's fine. And then you have a social event, and it's a party. So it's not always that people get together and have to act like, the world's about to end for, 6 months or something like that. But if your culture is like that, and if you live in a culture where you are expected to be very sad and unhappy and maybe wear black or whatever for a year or whatever, if that's part of your culture, then you need to do it. You need to appreciate that other people feel that way. And other people will be bothered and upset and annoyed. It'll bother them if you're not that way. So just like your culture has a lot of constraints that it puts on you, ways to be, ways not to be, things you can do, your sexual attitudes, your attitudes toward family. I mean, the culture has all of these things that it tells us how it is we're supposed to be. And when you're in a culture, you have to realize that you need to respect other people's viewpoints. So if other people are going to mourn for, weeks or years or whatever, then that's okay. Let them. That's something they feel they need to do, and let them do that. Don't say, come on, you had a couple of days, snap out of it. That's you kind of pushing your own ideas and your own attitudes on other people. So you be respectful of your culture and what other people do, but you don't have to be sad. But when you're in a place where everybody else is sad, you best not start telling jokes and laughing and doing the boogie and all that kind of thing, because that would be seen as inappropriate.
Yes.
So you have to not do things that are inappropriate within your culture, within your family, within your larger culture too. So don't be inappropriate because you disagree. Stay appropriate, but in your own mind, you can think, great for Uncle Fred. He was miserable. He was in pain. He was, 85 years old. He had been suffering, his stomach hurt, everything hurt. Now he's loose and he's going to start a whole new thing, and good for him. So instead of feeling sad, you can go right on, great. It's perfect. He was ready to die. Whether he felt that way or not, that was his next step to continuing on. So in that way, you can feel very positive about it and see the death as Uncle Fred's starting a whole new adventure where the opportunities to learn are going to be different than the ones he's had here. And they're going to be interesting and exciting. And he has another whole set of opportunities in front of him. So that's really a very positive thing, not a sad thing. So if you're thinking about Uncle Fred, then you should be happy. if you're thinking about yourself and how now you're going to have to get along without all the neat things that Uncle Fred did for you, now you're unhappy because, that's woe is me kind of unhappy. And woe is the other people. And I feel so bad for his widow, and I feel so bad for this and that. And, now you're, perhaps just connecting to other people's feelings of self-pity. So grieving is not a bad thing. I'm not saying nobody should grieve. Grieving is dealing with change. Dealing with change. And it tends to center around woe is me. Now my life isn't the way I want it to be. So it tends to center around self, just because most people are self-centered. The 99% of the population is very self-centered. So it's just the way we are. And having that grief period should be brief. You should get over it and you go on with your life and you keep living, you keep learning, you keep going. And as far as Uncle Fred goes, well, you're happy for him because now he doesn't have that pain anymore. He doesn't have that old body that doesn't work anymore. He's not wearing diapers anymore. He's able to do things and go places. And it's a very positive thing for the person who dies, not negative. Even on those tragic cases where the person who dies is a child and you say, well, they weren't ready to go. But yes, okay, that happened. It was an accident of some sort, maybe a rare disease, but they're going to go on. They didn't have a lot of investment either. So again, on to a new thing. Sad, yes, it will change your life. You'll have to deal with those changes, but you let it go. So it's normal. We get hit by a lot of change. It takes us some time to get our feet on the ground again. Yeah, to be generous and considerate and don't do things that are inappropriate, but inside yourself, mostly there's very little reason to be sad when somebody dies.
We're not supposed to laugh. That was very clear. And so I know that I can go ahead and I can help everybody at the funeral, and then I can think good thoughts on the inside that would be very helpful. And so if I'm happy on the inside at the funeral, that's not sociopathic at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. But if you exhibit behavior that is considered sociopathic by your culture, then you need to be aware of that. You need to not do things that are kind of in the face of your culture. That will just come back and bite you. That doesn't, that isn't helpful.
Thank you so much. You made that so very clear to me. And as always, I love you more than rocks and fractose.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. All right, now we're going to move on to Sasha's question. Sasha, are you there? Do you want to read it?
Yes, I'm here. So basically, my question is how to interface with the LCS, because culture teaches us, to interface with like the Abrahamic God or whatever deity, or even elders in our culture, or, teachers or whatever, with reference, with deference, with respect, sometimes even with a little fear maybe. But so my question is, sometimes I'm sort of trying to figure out how to interface with the LCS, more like a friend, a peer, my own higher self, or more like a distant, sort of shrouded in mystery elderly teacher, a deity, that sort of thing. So that's my question.
All of the above will work. Whichever way you happen to feel at the time, all of the above work just fine. You can start your conversation with the LCS like, "Hi, bro, what's happening?" That'll work. It doesn't matter. You can't insult the larger consciousness system. It's aware of you. It understands where you're coming from. It knows you. So you're not going to, you can't insult it. And it doesn't have a big ego. So it's not saying, oh, you need to start with praise, and you need to, really suck up and show me deference, and, do a little sacrificial something or other to show your good intentions. All of that, of course, is nonsense. So any way that you would like to approach the system, it's fine. And the way you really make a connection is by being serious about growing up. That's really the key to make the connection. If you're really serious about growing up and you are trying to get rid of your fear, you're trying to evolve the quality of your consciousness, and you're just not quite sure how to go about it, or you're not sure about this or that, then just contact, just interact. The LCS is just there to be helpful. So you can think of it as a counselor, or you can think of it as your best friend, or you could think of it as, the mother or father you always wanted but didn't have. You can think of it any way you like, and the system will not be upset at your presentation, however it comes by. You can treat the system as a peer. You can treat it as an old friend. Any of those things will work. It's not what you say. It's what your intent is. Why are you making the connection? What is it that you need to understand, and why do you need to understand it? That's what's important, not the salutation or the hello or how you get started. Just start with a conversation, and that'll work just fine. Now, do not ask the LCS or anybody else to make your choices for you. It's not like, well, LCS, I don't know whether, should I do this or should I do that? Should I go to that retreat for 2 weeks, or should I, do something else that day? Those are your choices. You have to make your own choices. The system will not make your choices. It does not want to take over your free will. The only way you grow is by exercising your free will, and then growing by seeing the results of your choices. That's how you grow up. It doesn't matter that you make mistakes. It doesn't matter that you make terrible choices. What matters is if you grow from them. If you're aware enough to see, oh, that was a terrible choice. And then you start thinking, why did I make it? What led me to do that? And then you try to change yourself so you won't do that again. That's how you grow up. So being perfect and saying the right things in the right way, having the right approach is totally irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Have the right stuff in your heart and want to grow, you're golden, no matter what you say. Whether you treat the LCS like it's your best friend, or a peer, or something magical, or whatever, it won't care. If it can help you, it will. If it can't help you because you're stuck in your intellect and everything it tells you is just going to be parsed by your intellect, then it may not help you very much because you're not ready yet. So being ready means being sincere and really wanting to change, being open. That's really what constitutes being ready.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Tom, Armin has a kind of a quick follow-up very related to this. It's about the LCS. When we are communicating with the LCS, is it directly involved in the communication, or are there kind of subsystems that it's set up, whether it be a guide subsystem, or, like you said, these deities that we might be interfacing? Is that just our perception, or are we actually interfacing directly with the LCS?
For the most part, I would say you are interacting directly with the LCS. If you have a system and that system is designed to evolve itself, and in that case means lowering entropy, the only reason to have subsystems is if it's something that you can't really handle yourself. if there's something else you need to do, like you're too busy, so you need somebody else to be in that spot. That's why you'd have a subsystem, that you need somebody else to take up a task that needs to be done that you don't have time for, or you don't know how to do, or for some other reason, you don't want to do it. But the LCS doesn't have that problem. The LCS, it's a consciousness system. It's an information system. All consciousness is netted. So it's already got a connection to you. It's conscious, you're conscious. All consciousness is netted. It's already there. You're on the net with it as well as everybody else. It doesn't need any intermediaries. It doesn't need somebody else to go through. It doesn't need hierarchy built in, because whenever you get hierarchy built in, you also get ego, belief, and fear built in, because most of those entities have their own issues. And now those issues start to color everything that passes through them, passes through their own lens. So the system has plenty of capacity. It's already connected to you because you're a piece of it, and there's really no need for other actors in the middle. Now, we tend to create these images of other actors. They're metaphors for us. When we think about our guides, well, we think, it's not the big man on top. He's not going to bother with us. That wouldn't be reasonable. It's going to be somebody else. It's going to be one of his helpers, and if this was, 700 or 800 years ago, then you would have called that helper an angel. It would have been God's angels. Now you'd call it a guide or something else, but that's just different language for, different metaphors for different times. And we tend to think that way because we feel a little more like that's, we have this sense of hierarchy. And, the king at the very top, nobody just gets to walk in and talk to the king. You talk to his advisors, you talk to his tax collector, you talk to the people that do things. Well, the king needs a whole lot of intermediaries because he's just one human body. He can only be so many places at one time, so many things at once, and he's only so smart and has, understanding of a limited number of things. So he needs a lot of help. He needs a lot of intermediaries to do his business. The LCS does not need intermediaries. It has all the connection and all the capacity and the desire to do the job. So I think most of those in-between things, all the angels and guides and so on, I just call them, that's your personal interface to the LCS. The LCS will give you a personal interface because that makes you feel better. That makes you feel more like you've got a connection. If this connection is stable, it has, it's male or female, has a sense of humor, or doesn't, it's old, it's young, however it is you make that connection, then talking to that being is easy because it's sort of like you, but different. So, that's my higher self. Okay, let my higher self be my go-between. But all of that is just metaphor because you don't really feel that a connection directly to the LCS is something that would be available to you because you're just a little bit of nothing and it's a whole lot of something, and those things just don't mix. Well, that's a belief that you get from our culture, from our society, from our history, because that's the way it is in the physical world. Physical world generates hierarchy because it's all limited physical beings, physical avatars. So nothing really gets done if you don't have a lot of intermediaries. One person can't do it all, but the LCS can do it all. So why would it use intermediaries that would just muddle the situation? So that's why I think that, I only talk about the LCS. We talk to the LCS talks of us. I don't put a lot of intermediate people in there. I say, oh, yes, you have guides. You can have a couple of guides, but I also say that guide's just your interface to the LCS. And that interface is there just for you because you think you're a human. Your consciousness thinking that you're human you're thinking you're the avatar, and it's just easier to talk to somebody that's more on your level, or maybe just step up. You know, you can talk to the king's advisor, maybe, or maybe the advisor's, you know, the advisor's cousin or something. You know, you could talk to the advisor's cousin who could talk to his uncle, who would get the word up to the king, you know. But that's us just generally feeling kind of inadequate and not all that big, and that's our history here. But it doesn't work that way with the LCS, with that system. I mean, you can think of yourself as just a virtual machine running inside of the you know, the mainframe. You know, now that's computer talk, and I don't know if that resonates in everybody's head, but you know, you're just a piece of that larger consciousness system. It doesn't have to go through an intermediary. You're a piece of it. It's already connected to you. And your success in evolving your consciousness is its success, because you're a part of it. As you evolve, it evolves automatically. So it has interest in your success. So not only is it connected to you, but it's interested in being as much help as it can to you. You see, now if you're ready and you're open and you're learning and you're growing, then you'll get all kinds of nudges and stuff from the LCS. All kinds of stuff will happen. Synchronicities will happen. Lots of stuff will just play out. If you're not ready, then the LCS will probably leave you alone. If you're just, you know, in denial that there's anything more than the material world, then what's the point? You know, the LCS could try to help you out, but you just brush it aside, or you ignore it. Or maybe, you know, you are ready, even though you still think there's nothing more than the material, but inside you really are ready to grow. So then that person would get worked with, even if they were, you know, the head of the materialist club. If they were ready to grow, they'd still get some help from the LCS. So that's kind of the, you know, that would be my point, or my feelings about the people in between. You know, the angels that are between us and the source. But we're just a piece of that source.
All right, Armand, does that help you out?
Absolutely. It's so amazing that the system can do all this at the same time. So that's where my question came from, that I was like wondering if there was other things going on to spread out the focus of the LCS. But yeah, I completely understand.
Well, computers are amazing that way. You know, information systems are amazing that way. You know, there's somewhere a mainframe at some website that gets 6 million hits an hour, and there's some computer that's talking to 6 million people every hour and never misses a beat, and still has time to, you know, upgrade its software, and you know, it's only using 20%, you know, of its throughput. All right, that's a big computer, but you know, not that the LCS is a computer, but it is an information system, and it can configure itself as kind of a computer if it wishes. So information systems are good at doing billions of things at the same time and doing them very quickly. That's really what makes an information system different than a human. Humans can maybe keep track of 4 or 5 things at once, and that's about as much, and most of us are more one track than that. We can only really focus on one thing at a time. But information systems can focus on, you know, a billion things at a time. That's the nature of an information system. So yeah, it is impressive. You know, it's impressive that you know, how many emails and web things, you know, web page things and whatever goes on per second, do you think, in the world? You know, if you take every email and every website and everybody that clicks on anything that makes the computer have to change and send them something else, how much of that is going on, you know, every second? Billions, trillions of of things being done every second. Yeah, well, take all those computers doing all that and put them all in one big machine, and you'd have one machine doing it all. It scales up very easily. So the LCS, being consciousness, can operate at billions of times faster than our slow little old electrons zipping around inside of transistor circuits. So it's a whole lot faster than the computers that we have, because it's not slowed down by our physical, this dense kind of physical stuff in the rule set. So, it's got plenty of capacity, and every individual is important. There are no individuals that are just not important enough to get noticed. Every individual is important. It's not, though, that every individual isn't necessarily ready to be interacted with.
That's a cool thing to end on for that one. Our next question is going to come from Sandra. She'd like me to read it. It's a simple one on meditation. She says that whenever she meditates, she feels she doesn't really have a clear goal or focus in mind, and she just has a general intent of wanting to grow up and get rid of fear. She's wondering if this is too vague, and if you have any advice on maybe smaller, more practical intents for a meditative session.
Okay. It's fine if you just want to be general and have this kind of, grow up and do good things. That's okay. That won't put you on the fast track, but that will put you on the track forward. That you can move forward with that, and not much more than that. Probably things will just happen more slowly. If you want the growth to speed up a bit, then you can probably start working on your fear, like we talked about earlier. You can start saying, well, what is my fear? Why, what is it that triggers me? Why do I get upset? Why does this make me anxious? Why does that cause anxiety? Why does this make me angry? And once you understand it, then keep that intent going 24/7 to outgrow it, to get rid of it completely. So you could do that. That would be now making an effort to speed up the process of evolution. But your evolution will keep cranking forward even if you don't meditate. It just will be slower. If you meditate and you try to cooperate with it, and you try actively to pursue learning and growing, then it'll happen a lot faster than if you just sit back and say, well, evolution, it comes, it goes, I'll just let it go with the flow. That's fine, and it will go with the flow, and eventually you'll get there. It'll just take a whole lot longer than if you're trying to get there.
Okay, maybe I missed Caroline's. We have a few more questions left. It seemed that we put it out for a vote. We're going to let Caroline speak. Caroline, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to, my question is related to primal man, primal woman, and I wanted to ask if we get rid of our fear just naturally if we start working it out. Will we naturally become more like that because it just feels good for us, like because it's inherent to who we are as a species?
Yes, that is true. You will just, as long as you are being, sincere, as long as you are not acting out of your fear, you're just being. If you're just being and being authentic, then basically you can just kind of follow what feels good, in a sense, because when you make poor decisions, you'll create problems. When you make good decisions, things will work out well. So just by kind of following what works, you will eventually evolve, but you have to be sensitive to other people. So it can't be just what works for you. Says, oh, this works for me. Aggravates everybody else, but it works for me. Therefore, I must be doing the right thing. No, if you're frustrating and aggravating everybody else, then you're probably not doing the right thing, because you need to care about other. But if you're just caring, being, experiencing, then yes, you'll end up going right where you need to go without really having to worry too much about it. You'll get there. You just have to let it take time. Matter of fact, if you try to push it and you try to force it with your intellect, oh, here's where I need to get, and I'm going to push that, you often just cause more trouble and make it take longer than if you just kind of surrender to being who you are, making your best choices, caring about others, making it more about others than yourself, and then just let things happen. Often you'll grow faster that way than if you try to manipulate things to come out the way you think they should. So yes, that's the difference in not living so much out of your intellect, where your intellect is trying to call all the shots, manipulate you to the place where you think you want to be. Your intellect is, is controlling. It's trying to control the situation to get you where you think you want to be and get the things you want. If you can get that intellect just to relax a little bit and just be who you are and follow what works, you generally tend to grow up faster than if you try to push on it, try to force it. It's a more organic approach. Just let your experience take you where it does. Try to let your intellect go. Intellect's good for things, finding your lost glasses, looking at maps and trying to get you to the place you want to go, things like that. The intellect's really necessary, and it's very good for things. But for trying to develop your inner being, it's not good for that. It's not very smart about intuitive things. It's not very smart about being level things. It tends to work with stuff much better than it works with people. So best not to manipulate people, but to let people be themselves and learn to live gracefully with them as themselves, the way they are. That's caring about other. So you let people be how they are. And you say, okay, that's the way you are. I'm okay with that. You can be that way. And then you find it's a lot easier than if it's like, well, that's the way you are, and that's not acceptable. You need to really be different, because I have these issues, and these issues of mine need you to be different. That generally it doesn't sell very well. Then you get pushback, and then you get anger, and then you get fights. So yes, to answer your question, it will just develop on its own, because that's what's natural. That's who you are. And that's what you're growing to do. And as soon as things don't go well and you feel unhappy, well, you've probably made a wrong choice. Probably. Sometimes, you get stuck in cracks in life. Sometimes you have to make hard choices. Sometimes it isn't always easy, but in general, life is good. You just try to make every choice a good choice and learn from your choices. And don't try to manipulate things to be the way you want them, or demand that things be the way you want them. Learn how to live with things the way they are. And I don't mean just suck it up and, soldier on. That's your intellect trying to act a role. I mean, learn to live with it and be happy and be okay with it. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you very much.
All right, Tom, I think we have time for one more. I think this one is kind of pertinent for what's happening now internationally. We had a question from Marla. Marla, do you want to ask the question? Okay, I'll go ahead. Basically, what is going on in the LCS when we have war happening in the reality. The recording of this is taking place March 3rd, 2022, and there's currently a political conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and there is people dying and soldiers at war right now. And so what's going on with the LCS? Are there any special calculations being done? Are they trying to nudge things certain one way or the other? Can you just speak on this a little bit?
I will, and I think I can probably work this conversation in to get one of the things that Asho asked as well, because she said something very similar to this. And no, there's nothing really special, I guess, that the LCS has to do. The idea is that, we're here, we interact with each other, we make choices. And by the choices we make, we create an environment for ourselves. And then we have to live in that environment. It's like, you make your bed, now you have to sleep in it. Or those are, the shoes you created, now you have to walk in them. It's one of those things. So the system has us here. The system does not manipulate our free will. The system cannot say, all right, people, I'll give you free will as long as you do what I want you to do. No wars, no disagreements, nobody gets angry because that's not nice. So you're not allowed to do that. But other than that, you have free will. Free will to do what I want you to do is not free will. So free will allows people to make poor choices and do unpleasant things to hurt other people. Free will allows for things like war, if that's what the people do. Now, there's all sorts of people involved in wars. There's the aggressor who's, created the war, and then there's the people who have the war run over them, who really maybe weren't on any side. They just happened to live in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's a large number of those that don't really have a side in the war. The only side they have is trying to survive under very harsh circumstances. Well, if that happens in your neighborhood, then there's lessons in there for you. And if it ends up that kills you, then you get a new life someplace else. So it's just part of what we do and how we are. And a lot of things affect us in different ways. We can be minding our business, driving our car within the speed limit, going down the road, and somebody who's drunk in a truck on the other side of the road comes across and runs right over us, and we all die. And maybe we and our whole family dies. That's unfortunate. Okay. The drunk made a bad choice. The person driving their car didn't necessarily make a bad choice. They were just going to see grandma, with the kids. But those things happen. And that's part of what, creates all the learning opportunities here. Learning opportunities are created by diversity. If everything were the same, then we wouldn't learn much. That's what was wrong with that big chat room. The reason the system had to create this virtual reality to begin with is there was too much sameness. There wasn't a lot of real significant consequences to what people did or thought or intended. So we get in this place and there's very strong consequences everywhere. Everything we do almost has strong consequences. The choices we make change our lives and change the lives of other people. So that keeps this pot well stirred. Sameness doesn't happen. It's constantly, everything's changing. And what just happens to happen to you has a strong component of randomness in it. You just happen to be in the car at the wrong place at the wrong time. And everything changes. A whole family disappears. Well, that doesn't happen real often. If it did, they'd build bigger barriers or sturdier cars or, cars that you couldn't start if you were drunk. They'd do more about it. So our culture only does as much as it feels, like it needs to do. And if it's in the margins, the culture pretty much ignores it. That's part of being in a culture with what, in this country, it's almost 400 million people. So if what happens to you is down in the weeds, all way off in the margins, then generally there's not much that anything's going to happen about it. It just is. It's like, that's the way it is, living here now. You have to deal with it. If it's happening to, hundreds of thousands of people, well, then the culture says, whoa, that's a bad thing. We need to fix that. And it'll start making laws or making policies or making rules to try to fix that problem. So, we have laws and rules, international laws and rules, but if somebody wants to make war, they just violate them, and they just, run over somebody else just because they can, because they want to, because they think there's something in it for them. But to give you a little good news on the upside of that, talking about wars, because I don't want you to leave depressed, and that is that, we've grown up a lot. I told you that this evolution thing, the more you evolve, the easier it is to evolve more. So the curve kind of goes slow at first and then gets faster. Well, we're on that knee of the curve where it's getting faster. We're not down in that slow part. I mean, we went for millennia after millennia after millennia with hardly anything changing. 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, it was really, really slow. But it's not that slow anymore. And you notice we're in a world now where when you just start a war because you want to grab somebody else's stuff, that's not seen in a very good light. You go back to the 1800s, right in the middle of colonialism, where all the Western powers, mostly Europe then, was running out and grabbing land and killing people and saying, this is mine now. And all you people used to live here, now you work for me. That was happening all over. And what was the general attitude? Well, hey, the survival of the fittest, and we're more fit. So, we survive and you don't. And if we're big enough and strong enough to take it, then it's ours. That was the attitude. There wasn't any general attitude of, oh, that's not nice. We shouldn't go out and take things, do that to those people and subjugate them and steal their resources. And, that's not a nice thing to do. So that was just 1800s, a couple of centuries ago. Just a couple of centuries ago, that attitude was okay. And most of the people in Europe thought it was fine. They were big and they were powerful. Why shouldn't they go out and help the poor little peasants some other place, build railroads and come into this century? They actually thought that they were, benign, the deliverers of technology and modernness. So they were not just, ripping people off, they were helping them out, helping them grow up into the modern age. Well, of course, that people will justify anything that they do, with stories like that. They'll always justify, some nasty thing that they want by making it in their mind something that is good and not evil. So just look at that progress, right? Just 2 centuries. Now, for millennia after millennia after millennia, nothing changed. It was warlords and tribes. Stayed that way for a long time. Now, 1800s to the 1900s, now we're in the early part of the 2000s, and Russia decides it wants something, so it's just going to go out and grab it by force. And what they're going to find is that it's not the 1800s anymore. The world doesn't support that anymore. The people and other governments don't say, well, of course, you're strong. They're not strong. You can take it if you want. That's the way it is. The strong do that to the weak. That's just the nature of things. Perfectly all right. We're not there anymore. Just 2 centuries. And most people look at that and say, how awful. Why do they think they have to do that? That's wrong. You see? So it's a different world now. And because of that, because we've grown up that much into centuries, 2 or 3 centuries, because of that, it'll probably be true that the perpetrators of this war will find that in the long run, it was a terrible mistake. That in the end, they're going to have less, not more. It's just, that's the nature of the way this works. They're going to learn a lesson that this is no longer the 1800s, and that sort of thing is not looked on favorably. And they will be shunned, and they will be pariah and they will be ruining their image, their sense of worth, their sense of value to the world. All of that is going to start to tank. They'll be seen as the problem nation, not the whatever. So on the bright side of this, you have to look at the fact that we've changed. It's a different place. And yeah, they can do it and they can get away with it. But give this a decade to play out, and you will find that they're going to be worse off for it, not better off. It's not like, oh, yeah, we captured a lot of resources. We captured a lot of manpower. We captured more territory. Yay for us. We're going to be bigger and stronger now. No, it won't work that way because the world doesn't support it anymore. And it'll probably be the beginning of the end of Putin because he's the one that drove this thing. So I suspect he just started his own demise by doing this because I think his citizens probably don't like it either. So you see, it's it all works out. We are growing up. This is a kinder, gentler, better place. It's not just that there's this evil, nasty stuff in the world, but the system lets us grow up. And then when you have 7 billion people or so out of the 8 billion people who are saying, that's not right, that's not good. Well, you have 7 billion people who are going to grow up a little bit. They've just seen the difference between good and evil there, whereas in 1800s, they couldn't see that. Now they can. So a whole lot of people will take a step to the side of realizing that that's bad behavior, unacceptable behavior, who otherwise never even thought about it. That helps us grow up just a little more, you see? So this kind of thing ends up actually pushing our growth forward, not dragging it backward. Whereas back in the 1800s, it just drug everything backwards because people weren't ready yet to see the problem. So they didn't see the problem. There was no problem. Now there is a problem. And the more people see the problem, the more they grow up and say, yeah, that sort of thing's a problem. They become more aware of it. So by doing that now, they actually are going to help this evolution speed up just a little bit because they are now the best bad example of how to be. And we learn from bad examples. We learn from good examples too, but we can also learn from bad examples. So that's the positive thing. If you look at this and you say the system just lets it play out the way it plays out. People have free will. And when they learn from the consequences. All right. Now all of us here, we're not suffering those consequences of that war. But we see them. We feel them. We're watching all the pictures. We're all connected. You see, back in the 1800s, nobody at home saw that war. Nobody at the home saw, people being bombed and that kind of stuff. That was all in a place far, far away, out of mind and out of sight. So nobody really cared much. Not the case anymore. We're all plugged in. We all see that. That makes us grow up faster than we could have grown up back when it was in a land far, far away where nobody saw the horrors of it, except the people who were there. So you see, it's just part of the process of us growing up. So it's not like that's a horrible thing and somehow the LCS should step in and stop it. Well, that's not the way it works. We don't grow up that way. We grow up by having to deal with the mess that we create from our own bad choices. That's our stick. Is that we do things that are wrong, we see that they're wrong, and we change. That's our way out. So, in the big picture, this probably will aid our evolution rather than drag it backwards very far, because it's out of time. It's the wrong time. 200-300 years ago, it would have played wonderfully. And it did play wonderfully. Russia already did that. Took up all those countries once, and everybody said, fine, hey, no problem, you can have them. So then the big problem was that the big countries would end up fighting over who's going to get the little countries. But it's not so much like that anymore. We figure those little countries are there, they deserve to be there, and they have a right to be there. And running over them is not a good thing. Just like people, little people have a right to be little people and to be where they are and to do what they're doing, and running over them just because you can is not a good thing. So it's a lesson that we will learn, and we learn it by seeing it, by being a part of it, by connecting to it. So that's the good news. It's not just bad news. It's part of our evolution. It's the way things work. And the thing that I was going to get, that Asho talked about, that I was going to pull into it too, she makes the point of, sometimes you just want to get out there and fix things. Sometimes you just feel the need to go out and grab somebody by the throat and shake them, tell them to stop, and where do we draw this line? Where is it that we, the forces of good, can gain power so that we can force other people to be nice, or to not be so mean or so evil or nasty or self-centered? Well, that she didn't say it that way, but that's basically one of her questions, is this thing about accepting the world the way it is, accepting people the way they are, accepting that this, we're all learning, but it's slow, and we see all these terrible things, and we want to go out and do something. We want to slap somebody, we want to get physical. We want to go, stop it. This isn't appropriate behavior. You're not being nice, but what does that do? Could we do that? Is that something? Should all the good people in the world rise up and slap down all the bad people in the world? No, that won't help. People don't learn by being slapped. When you slap somebody, it just makes them mad. It makes them angry. They double down on whatever dysfunction they have. Now they have it twice as much. That isn't helpful. You can't fix things that way. What you're doing by the good people rising up and battling the bad people and getting rid of them, what you're doing is just trying to fix the symptoms. The symptoms of war and of predatory corporations and people trying to rip other people off and take advantage of people and steal their stuff. All of that stuff happens because people are of pretty low quality of consciousness. That's why it happens. Now you can take your army of the good and make the evil sit down and be quiet, but has anybody learned anything? Yes, they've learned one thing. Power is the only way to settle a problem. The good has to overpower the evil. So power is what really solves problems. You solve problems through force, by keeping those bad guys from doing bad things. We force them to straighten up. And that is what makes this a better place. No, that doesn't. What that does, even given that all these are good people and they are slapping only bad people, all that does is make everybody behave better. But it's not about behavior. It's about changing who you are and growing up. So yes, you have an army of good that will slap anybody who does something that isn't nice. So people will stop doing things that aren't nice because they don't want to get slapped. But are they growing up any? No, not growing up a bit. And are the people who are the good people who are forcing the bad people to be nice, are they growing up? No, they're not growing up either. They're just learning that might makes right. Force has its way. And of course, those bad people eventually will come back with more force. And it'll just be fighting and struggle and fighting and no end to that. The only way to end it is to solve the problem, not to try to fix the results of the problem, not to try to fix the symptoms, but to fix the problem. The problem is a low level of quality amongst human beings. That's the problem. And if you fix that problem, then the getting nasty people to be nice solves itself. There won't be any nasty people if you fix that problem. It'll go away. People will care about others. People will see bigger pictures. People won't be so self-centered and fearful. So that's the thing. We need to solve the problem, not try to suppress the symptoms, because forcing the symptoms to be suppressed, that is the symptoms of nastiness, will just create more trouble. Because once that power of good sits there for a while, there's going to be somebody going to come along and say, I'd like to run that. I'd like to be the emperor here. And that force for good then eventually turns out to be a force for evil. Because what is that? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, they say. So any place you have power, you're going to have not nice people wanting to grab it and take it over by what? Appearing to be nice for a while, then changing, whatever. So you don't solve anything by going over and slapping the bad guys. It just makes everything worse. So how can you make humanity grow up? You can't make anybody grow up but yourself. So what is the most optimal thing you can do for world peace and for happiness and getting rid of wars and hunger and nastiness all around? Grow up. That's it. Raise your own quality of consciousness, because that will help others grow up, and those others will help others grow up. So that's what you can do, and you can't do anything any more meaningful than that. That's your biggest contribution. You can't force anybody else to grow up, and if you do, you'll make them worse. And you will be the one pushing them, forcing them to be nice like you want them to be. That doesn't work. So that's the answer to Ash O, who has been being just a nice person trying to get along and let everybody be, but she just wants to get out there sometimes and slap some people because they need to be slapped. And yes, I can see her coming to that conclusion. You kind of feel like that. You just like to grab somebody by the throat and shake them sometimes. Maybe make them see that they're wrong. Well, that doesn't work. They won't see that they're wrong. They'll see that you're wrong, and they will redouble their own behavior. And now you just have a fight, and that fight never ends, because everybody who is in a position to bully others thinks they're right. All those people in the colonial times back in the 1800s in Europe, they all thought they were right. They were doing good deeds. They were helping people, come into the future. It was their right to go grab things that they had the power to grab. Let the poor, ignorant peasants see how, real people lived. We'll build them a railroad. We'll do other things like that. So anyhow, that's the good news, Marlo. On the back of the bad news, yes, there's war. Yes, there's greedy people. Yes, there's nastiness almost everywhere you look. People out for themselves. Self-centeredness is everywhere. But that's because that's the way we are. And we just need to grow up. And the only way you can do that is to grow yourself up and hope somebody else grows themselves up too. But you see,
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
But the pressure mounts. You see, the pressure now on Putin and Russia is to change. So when other people grow up, it puts pressure on everybody to grow up. See, that's the thing. So it's not just you, but you and the rest of the world now says just taking over other people's countries is not nice. And we'd like to play nice now in 2022. We'd rather play nice. So that puts pressure on others to do better. And now we're going to see that pressure applied and see what happens. And I give it a 99% probability that when all the dust settles and it's cleared, Russia and Putin will have learned a very tough lesson, and they won't like the results of the lesson. It won't be a great win for them. It'll be just the opposite. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom.
it's evolution. We're upwards and onwards, Let's be positive.
Keep it
yes.
going, right? Let's keep it going.
Exactly. So don't think war, how awful and how terrible and how can we live with that? It's just the part of our natural evolution.
growing pains, right?
Growing pains. But
Mm-hmm.
hey, now we can see growth. You know, if you lived in the 5th century, you'd look as far back as you could see and you wouldn't see, you'd hardly see any growth at all. And I can see how that would be very disheartening. But now we can look back not that far and we can see a lot of growth in people. We have grown up a lot.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, I think that's a great way to end our session today. I want to thank everyone for coming, and obviously thank you for taking the time out and spending it with us. I think that was a really wonderful session, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time.
MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.